reality of phantoms and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it.
Hey, folks, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Phantoms Monsters Radio. Thanks for joining me. Phantoms Monsters Radio channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. And the Buy Me a Coffee link is also available, so thanks for your consideration. I want to thank or welcome all new members to the channel, as well as first-timers in the chat. If you're listening to me for the first time, please like and subscribe to the channel. Set your notifications and bell icon so you receive word when a new presentation is live or being posted on the channel. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps. So I want to thank everybody for spending the holidays with Phantoms Monsters Radio. We're presenting our annual Creepy Christmas Cheer Show with our Phantoms Monsters Fortean Research team guest. And this year we have Sean Forker, Bernadette McDaniel, and in the background, Tommy Carroll is there. And we're bringing together our favorite creepy Christmas stories and reports for your listening pleasure. The chat will be open for your questions, so feel free to post them up there, and we'll try to get to them the best we can. Now, before we get started, I do want to say I did receive this from my friend Lala Bright, who does readings, produces organite crystals, and does art. So the link for her website is in the description below. So go ahead and click on there and see what she has to offer. So, hey folks, thanks for coming in with me tonight.
Hello, old friend.
Yeah, you know, for those who don't know, now Sean's on the Phantoms Monsters Fortean Research team, but we started working together. Oh my God, how many years has it been? Been at least a decade, hasn't it?
Well, 2008. So we'll go backwards. It's
been
a long time.
Lord. Yeah, well, tell the folks about your show while we're on here, Sean.
Well, before we do that, I'll keep the shameless promotion going. Send Lon lots of cups of coffee and cash. This is a great show. We need to keep it going. So send him the money, folks. Let's make it rain. Don't throw your quarters. They hurt, but we'll take your cash. On Monday nights, Lon, I do Sasquatch Experience with, God, I have 4 co-hosts now. I may have the most co-hosts out of any podcast, but we make it work every week. Vance Nesbitt, Matt Arner, James Baker, and Henry May. James Baker and Henry May both been doing the show with me since 2005. So we took a little bit of a break, but we're back Monday nights at 9 here on Facebook or YouTube. Just check it out, and we'll be glad you came by. You can send me money too. I won't say no. We need cash, folks. We work for a living.
Absolutely. And Bernadette is with us. Bernadette McDaniel, who before she had her next child, she was doing her show on Phantoms Monsters Radio. So Bernadette, say hi to everybody. Oh, mute. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay, good.
I didn't hear a word you said, so just go ahead and do it again.
Before I realized I was right. Okay. But yeah, no, I decided to take some time off to get into the swing of things with 2 kids, and you know, being sleep deprived does not help things.
Well, I understand that. Look, I had kids 11 years apart, so I had to go through two sets of mania. So I
got
get it,
3.
and you've got 3. So yeah, we all know that. Thanks to Mortal Clown for her donation. I appreciate it. I got to get her on here too one day.
Mhm.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So tonight we're here to talk about creepy Christmas. So I'm going to start out with Sean. I know you got something to talk about. So I'm going to let you go at it and tell us one of your stories, and we'll kind of go around the horn.
Well, Lon, it's a real story. It was so I had been working a case that was given to be by Cliff Barrickman from Finding Bigfoot, right? I'm a Bigfoot researcher predominantly, and I dabble in other things, but Bigfoot tends to be my mainstay. And we get a report that comes in. Some gentleman, when he was out going out hunting in the morning, witnesses somebody walking in the field on his farm. Well, it's private property, seeing somebody out in his field at earlier in the morning, setting up some alarms, but thinking maybe it was a wayward hunter. He yells across the field, and the thing stops, looks at him, and as the thing starts moving through the field, goes to a hay bale. Those round hay bales, Lon, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
about 6 feet tall when it's lying on its side. And he says this thing is 2 feet taller than the hay bale. And it just stands there, looks at him. He yells it again, and it saunters off into the woods. So we get a call to go out and investigate and show up. And, this gentleman's very credible. Like, he's a retired veteran from the Marines. He teaches MMA fighting. Very credible guy, not full of crap. And so we built a relationship with him. Well, not long after does he report that sighting. In January, I don't even think January was that long. We took a break over the holiday season. His son, Christmas morning, comes down the steps. And now there's this big picture window that's at the bottom of their staircase that faces this field. And in this field, there's a dog run going from the house down to the little shed area down into the woods. Well, as his son's coming down the steps, he sees this large, man like figure walking up the dog run from the woods towards the house. His son's mortified, screams, run over to the couch, lays on the couch crying. Dad comes running down the steps, what's going on? And, his son's telling his dad that, this is what just happened. Well, having his sighting earlier, now his son just has a sighting, kind of freaks him out. He goes outside, takes a look, and the dogs are cowering in their pen near the shed area. Now, these aren't normal dogs. These dogs are wolf hybrids. Okay. They're big dogs, Lon, huge dogs. And they're not very intimidated by things. And these things are cowering in their pens. And he's had some vocalizations not long after that. But this happened Christmas morning. So you can imagine how the rest of the day went. You come down and ho, 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 Merry Christmas. Your son's screaming on the couch because this, large figure comes, lumbering up their dog shed. And that was just the second sighting. We went out there many times throughout that winter. And I'm a winter researcher to begin with, but we're going out there, Lon. It's negative 10 degrees by the creek side. Out there, we got some calls, vocalizations. The one night we were out there, Lon, this giant boulder. I don't want to say, okay, that's a little bit of a hyperbole, but this giant rock was thrown and bounced against a guardrail and made such a smash. It scared the hell out of all of us. Came out of nowhere. Something large and powerful had to pick that up and chuck it against that guardrail. Right. So now you had his sighting in November, his son's sighting on Christmas. And throughout that winter, it was a pretty intense winter in that area. But come springtime, it started dissipating. And then we had one final text message where he was finding some, tree breaks. And then I've never heard from him again. I don't know what happened. It just dried up. I never heard anything from him after that. So I've been trying to reconnect with this witness. And when I was doing a presentation in the summer this year, the town I was talking about, the town of Catawissa, one of the people in attendance was the town magistrate. And he pulls me aside. It's the only presentation my wife's ever come to of mine. Okay. And this guy somehow manages to sit next to her at the back of the room, and they're chatting it up. And she goes, this guy wants to talk to you. You're not going to believe who he is. So we have a conversation. So this guy's going to try to get me back in touch with the witness and try to get me back out in that area. Cause I still firmly believe there's a lot going on in that particular part of the state. There's a lot of other witnesses that are starting to come forward from those parts of PA where we've not had a lot of reports from in the past. So I'm excited to see what happens. Christmas story, creepy because it happened that morning, Christmas morning. And, I don't know. I think we tend to get a little busier here in the winter months in Pennsylvania
I think we do.
than most places.
Well, people are seeing tracks in the snow, and of course, it's the easiest way to identify something big is roaming around. What county was this in?
That was in, let's see, it would be Columbia County.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't hear much out of there.
No, you don't. Not whole area, Columbia, Montour, Northumberland, Snyder, that little area, Union County is quiet, but it borders right up against Lycoming County, and it starts going up in that northern part of the state and let's be honest, that entire northern part of the state up until the last probably 10 years has been absent of reports because there was nobody up there to collect them. And now that people know that I'm here and Matt Arner and, the only person that was out there beforehand was really Joe Biello. We're starting to get those reports now more frequently. And it's amazing the people they're coming from. Somebody from Fish and Game, we had a report from them in 2016. He's a fish commissioner. I had utmost respect for him. Police officers. I got a report this summer from a police officer who may have something on this body cam. But we're trying to get clearance to get that because you just can't, we'll see how that happens. We'll see how that goes. And the magistrate's trying to help us with that too. So it's just really interesting, some of the things that are coming out in this area. And of course, Lon, not Christmas related, but it is the home of the Todd Seas case, right? Which
absolutely. I was just going to say Northumberland is big for UFO activity and other crazy stuff. So
more seems to pop from that every so often than we anticipate. So one little, I guess I could say little Christmas story there, but the winter month in general, like I said, is very fruitful in this area for the big fella.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I had one sighting and about it. I had one report come in up in, it wasn't Potter County, I don't think. It was the county east of that. Maybe that was Columbia. Was that Columbia County? I don't know. But anyway, I did have one report. They were out there hunting for Christmas trees. And they saw this thing out there. So, I forgot all about that. I didn't even think about that until you mentioned it. But yeah, we did. They were out hunting for a Christmas tree when Bigfoot was sighted.
Now near that area that you're talking about, there is an apple orchard out that way. And, Rick Fisher, has these stories of the albatwitch that he's been, collecting and sharing over the years. We had a farmer back when the PBS was really hot back in the day, that claims he has something on photo, and we were never able to retrieve the photograph or even get a hold of the farmer. And as I narrowed it down to who I believe it was, the gentleman has now since passed away. So I don't know if we'll ever get it, but there's apple orchards out that way, and I'm pretty sure that these little Bigfoot, albatwitch, or whatever, or just your natural Bigfoot, love these apple orchards. Free food. Why would you not?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, down this way, that's what they're. We've got apple orchards everywhere around here, and that's where people see them a lot. If you go into Micho State Forest. Well, I mean, the whole border of Micho has got apple orchards all around. So yeah, they got plenty of food up there. So, okay, Bernadette, you've got something to tell us.
So my Christmas story is not Bigfoot related.
Okay.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be.
Actually, it's weirdly it is. I don't have a Bigfoot tale. So my creepy Christmas story is actually Santa related, oddly enough. So it was like the year I'd found out when Santa was not real. But I was still young enough to be like, he is real, even though I was told he wasn't. And so I went to bed Christmas Eve, and I was in such denial. I was like, he is real. And so where yeah, you know where I lived. I lived up on top of the mountain, and everything happens up there. So I'm laying there, and I can still picture like how my room was laid out and everything. And so from my right side, I could hear like this sound. And up on the mountain, there's no cars. I mean, there's no neighbors. We were the only family and everything. And it got louder and louder, and it was sleigh bells. It was literally sleigh bells. And it was so loud, it went over the house. And I mean, I jumped out of bed, and I ran next door to my mom's room, and I said to her, "Do you hear this?" And she always slept with the TV on, and like the news was on. And she sat up, and I'm like, "Listen." And she looked at me, and she turned white. And I'm like, "Do you hear that? That is Santa's sleigh." I'm like, "Let's go outside." She's like, "No, we're not going outside." I said, "But do you hear this?" I was so excited. She's like, I hear it. I don't know what it is, but we're not going outside." And you could hear it just going down towards like Ligonier, Pittsburgh way. And I was like so excited and like convinced and everything. So when Thomas and I, got together years later, I told him I had mentioned this. I had said, I have this weird story and all this. And he's like, "I heard those," because he had lived in Jennerstown, where I said it came from the right. That would have been the right. Yeah. That would have been the other side of the mountain. He said he had heard those same sleigh bells. I had never told anyone that. And he's like, he had heard those sleigh bells. Yeah.
Well, that's right on the ridge, isn't it?
No, I didn't see anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was along the ridge.
I never saw anything. I never saw anything, but I heard, classic sounding sleigh bells that were, they started in the distance and then they got louder and louder until they were deafening.
Wow.
A little non-localized
I've never heard anything
bell phenomena.
like that since. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, that's right up on Chestnut Ridge. So just something else to chalk up for the Chestnut Ridge.
Strange bells.
Yeah. And when he told me that he heard that, I was very shocked. Yeah. I was very shocked because I had never told anyone else that. I've never heard anyone else tell me that they heard that up there or around here. And when he said that, I was like, "You're kidding." He's like, "No, I heard them."
Wow.
So I don't know what they were. That's
yeah.
If I were to say what they were, they sounded like classic Santa sleigh bells to me. So
interesting.
I didn't hear any pattering on the rooftop, did you?
No. No. And I wanted to go out there so bad and see what they were, but she just would not let me. She looked like a sheet. She was so scared. She was like, "I don't know what this is, but no, you're not going out there." She acknowledged she heard it, but that was as far as she was going to. She wouldn't even let me near the window. Like her window faced like towards Ligonier Way. And I'm like, I went to her number. She's like, "No, you stay by the bed. You stay right here." She's like, "You don't go near that window."
Yeah, well, honestly, you being her kid, I probably wouldn't let my kid do that either. So God knows.
No.
Well, I got a story that I have been posting almost every year since I've been doing the blog, and I only ever read it one time on the air, and that was for Dave Scott. So I'm going to go ahead and read it tonight. I don't know how many people have heard it, but I'm going to read it anyway because it's so weird. But this was forwarded to me back in 1998. Now, I was told that this is a true tale despite the bizarre details. Even though it's holiday related, I had some reservations originally since there's a combination of death and Christmas. But nonetheless, I receive requests from other bloggers every year to use on their site. So here goes. So I'd love to hear what people think about this, because it seems like it really can't get any straight answer from anyone as to what this was. So here we go. So the letter started out, "Hello. I have a disturbing Christmas related story that took place in a remote small town located on Mount Desert Island, Maine. My name is George, and I have lived here all my life. I hesitate to name the town since this story could carry unintended consequences for the residents. I know that the story is true because I was a witness to it. It started in early December of 1960 when I was age 12. Each week, my mother and I would walk to the local supply store to stock up on whatever we needed at the time. We didn't have the car because my father used it for his work as a state employee. He was away from home for several days at a time. The walk wasn't too far, but it was a bit hard during the winter since we had heavy snow at times. Now, the store was owned by a wiry old man named Big John Cornell. Now, Big John was well known in the area since he was a sort of a legend after he had saved the life of a girl in the 1930s who had been attacked by a rogue gray wolf. He would show the scars on his arms from the confrontation to the local kids when they'd come into the store with their parents. Big John was also a storyteller, and I mean some real whopper tales, especially when it pertained to his personal history. Now, on this day, I was admiring Big John's small Christmas tree with wooden ornaments that he claimed he carved himself. There were all sorts of animals, including bears, elephants, tigers, etc. There must have been 50 or so wooden ornaments. Now, as I stood in amazement at the detail in these carvings, Big John walked up to me and sat down in a rocking chair beside the wood stove. He lit his small black pipe, sat back, and rocked away while watching me examine the Christmas tree. After a minute or so, John asked me if I believed in Santa Claus. Now, I was surprised by the question, but assured him that I no longer believed in the legend. John looked away, smiled, and said, "Well, that's good. I didn't want you to be disappointed this year." I was confused by his statement. What did he mean? A few days later, my mother asked me to walk to the store for a few items she needed. My aunt had stopped over for a visit, and my mother was busy with her, so I made the lone jaunt myself. This wasn't unusual since I was now old enough to do this on my own. When I reached the store, Big John was sitting in his rocking chair reading a magazine. He looked up and asked me if he could talk to me. I sat down on the small chair on the other side of the wood stove, anticipating one of Big John's tall tales. What he told me was more than I ever expected. Big John's demeanor started to change. Whatever he was going to tell me was probably more serious than one of his typical parables. He looked into my eyes and said, "Something unusual happened last Christmas Eve." He paused, then continued, "I saw the dead body of Santa Claus." Well, I'm not sure what my facial expression was, but I can tell you what I was thinking. This old man was 4/4 short of a dollar. Again, he said, "I really did see Santa Claus's dead body." Now I'm thinking to myself, why is he telling me this? So he started to explain what happened. Last Christmas Eve, he was at home getting ready for the drive to his sister's house on Christmas Day. He then heard a huge crashing sound in the woods near the house. He looked out the bedroom window but couldn't see anything, so he decided to investigate. The snow was very deep all around the property and into the woods. It was a clear, cold night, and the moonlight was bright. Big John held a camp lantern in front of him as he made his way through the pine forest. Then he saw something lying in the snow. Now, as he got closer, he noticed a man with a blood-stained white beard and hair, dressed in a tattered red-colored coat and pants. Big John knelt to check the man's condition. It was obvious that he was dead. In fact, the body was terribly mangled, though there was little noticeable blood. Now, the body looked as if it had been dead for a few days. Big John explained that he reported finding the body to the authorities, who soon retrieved the remains. He said that the police told him that they wanted to keep the death quiet until they determined the identification of the deceased. He agreed not to mention the incident. I asked Big John, "Well, why are you telling me? What are you telling me?" He smiled and said, "Because I have to tell someone." He got up from his rocking chair, walked behind the counter, and reached into a drawer. He walked back toward me and handed me a pair of wire frames without the lenses. "Take these. These belong to Santa Claus." I placed the wire frames in my pocket and told Big John that I had to get going because it was getting late. I bought the items that I came for and heard they left the store. My head was buzzing all the way home. For 2 days, I wondered why Big John decided to tell me the story. I eventually determined that this was just one of Big John's ruses. I placed the wire frames in a shoebox and pushed it deep into the recesses of my messy closet. On Christmas Eve, my mother came home after walking to the store. I was sitting at the table working on a new jigsaw puzzle. I heard her asking someone on the phone if they knew why Big John's store was closed. Now, by that time, my father was home, so he decided to drive to Big John's house to make sure he was okay. After an hour or so, my father returned and said that Big John wasn't home, but his car was in the driveway. He had also noticed smoke coming from the chimney, so the fireplace was still burning. He decided to call the local sheriff and make an inquiry. Now, after several days, no one had seen Big John. His relatives and friends were contacted, but no one had any information. The sheriff was finally convinced that something was wrong, so he entered the house. Nothing unusual was found, no clues as to Big John's whereabouts. The next logical place to look was the store. Now, here's where the story gets fuzzy. I had no knowledge of what the sheriff had found until my father told me a few years later. Now, while searching the inside of the store, the sheriff and the deputy found a large mound of old rugs in the middle of the ground cellar floor. The deputy started to remove the rugs until he started to notice an unmistakable odor. Before he removed more rugs, the district coroner was called to the location. What they discovered was both unusual and confusing. There were skeletal remains of a human body with a tattered red coat and pants. Well, I'm sure my jaw noticeably dropped. I told my father the story Big John had told me. Eventually, I told the same to the sheriff, and I also retrieved a pair of wireframes and handed it over to the state police. Now, since that time, I have not heard or seen anything further concerning this incident. I suppose there are various scenarios that could be created from this story, but I just wish I knew what happened to Big John. So anyway, I as a side note to this, at the time I received this story in 1998, there had been no information on Big John Corneau or the body found in the cellar. I did confirm through the constable in Ellsworth, Maine, who had acquaintances living nearby, that a situation with a few similar circumstances did occur in a hamlet in northeast section of the island, very near the Acadia National Park in the early 1960s. He was unfamiliar with Big John Corneau, or if the case was ever resolved. So that's my story.
Did they test the bones to see who the bones belong to?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I did ask George that, and George, he didn't know. There was no information. I don't know if they kept it quiet. I don't know, just for good reason. If they ever identified the body, if they ever found John, I don't think they did. I have made inquiries several times about this, and his name just does not register. I don't know if he was living under a false name or what the deal was.
So, but what if the bones were John's bones?
Well, that's just it.
Yeah.
But if they were, boy, he
killed Santa.
It was quick. I mean, he decomped real quick if that's the case.
But they said the bones were pretty clean though, right? What if somebody chemically suited those bones for their own purposes?
Possibly. Yeah. It's a strange story. I go back and read it every once in a while, just trying to figure out what I can come up with it, but it's just really bizarre.
Well, is there a record of the other body that he found?
No.
That he said he found, or no?
When the sheriff and the deputy picked it up, it was sent to the state lab. Now, this is an island. This is an island off the coast of Maine near Acadia National Forest. So if they sent the body or what the remains were, they had sent to Portland because that's where the state coroner is. But there's no hide and hair, no pun intended, of where this body is. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with this story.
I don't know. Now you got me going down the rabbit hole. I hope nobody checks my search history tomorrow. So weird. I killed Santa Claus is going to be like, I'm going to need bail money, Lon. Thanks.
Yeah, well. Yeah, that's probably one of the weirdest stories I've probably ever received. But
not weird, it's messed up, man. That's just
it is
wrong.
Yeah,
it is. So.
Forget Grandma got run over by a reindeer being morbid.
Oh, so you got anything else for us, Sean?
And I don't think I would have turned.
Go ahead, Bernadette.
Oh, I was gonna say I wouldn't have turned those glasses over though. I would have showed them, but I don't think I would have gave it to them to keep.
Well, a 12-year-old kid,
now they don't have,
Yeah. Yeah, and Joshua asked in the chat, I wonder what the crash was. Well, who knows? I mean, the fact
a missing body.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one bothered me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he was setting the kid up for some type of excuse to why he disappeared for some reason, or.
But now think about that. You get a disgruntled kid who didn't get what he wanted for Christmas, kills a department store Santa Claus, right? You've got your alibi. So he gives the kid the glasses, so the kid now has evidence with his fingerprints all over it.
I never thought about
fled
that.
The scene, and now the little 13-year-old kid killed Santa, and we got a whole situation in our hands. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a bizarre story. So.
You just went way down that rabbit hole, didn't you?
That's where the brain goes because all that true crime shit my wife makes me watch.
So has anybody got anything else?
I was relying on you for more, Lon, because you have all the good stuff.
Oh, I've got plenty.
All I can think about, you remember the Conjuring 2, right? The movie The Conjuring 2. You and I talked about that well before Warner Brothers made that into a movie.
Oh, absolutely.
And you had your, hands on that case beforehand. But some of that happened over Christmas time.
It did.
Right? And that's just messed up.
Yeah, that whole case was so bizarre. I mean, the film didn't do it justice. I mean, it really did. The first, second, and the third was, I don't know what that was all about. But a lot of that case did not get into the movie. I don't want to disparage Lorraine and Ed, but, it was just a lot of that didn't get out. Now, I had talked to a lot of the family at the time, and kind of not official, but that whole thing was bizarre. Did it really happen the way that Ed and Lorraine described it as happening? It could have. But I think some of the family had different interpretations of what they thought had happened.
Is that
So,
uncommon? Everybody
yeah.
perceives stuff differently, right? So maybe it doesn't have to be anything that's nefarious in any way, shape, or form. It's just perception, right? And what if
Yeah.
one of the things that made that entity or whatever it was more powerful is its ability to make people perceive things differently. If you can't corroborate a story, you just got a bunch of people that are out to look like they're crazy, and you win even more.
Yeah.
I mean, we're giving
Yeah.
a lot of credit to a spirit or a poltergeist or whatever they want to call that thing. It's not a poltergeist. Let's be honest. I think we can dispel poltergeist from classify our entities more correctly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's definitely interesting stories. Like so many of these hauntings that happen. Today, when I was in the car, I was thinking about some of the first real paranormal encounters, and I'm sitting here thinking of how smart Charles Dickens was, right? Because he creates this spellbinding paranormal encounter. Could it have been a dream? Could it have not been a dream for Ebenezer Scrooge? Right, A Christmas
Mm-hmm.
Carol is the best ghost story there is.
Absolutely. And the one thing about the Christmas Carol, all the iterations of that story, it still comes down to the same story. It's kind of hard to screw that one up.
Right.
People have tried, but it still comes down to the original story.
Which
Yeah,
one's more
Vinny,
impactful for
I
you?
doubt Vinny's getting up. Vinny's over here sleeping. People in the chat are asking for Vinny.
Which ghost was
old.
more?
He's the real star of the show.
Lon, which ghost was more impactful for you? Was it Jacob Marley? Was it past, present, or yet to come?
Every entity in that story has got a real profound effect on anybody who watches it or reads it. Reading it, I have read it, and reading it is 10 times better than actually watching a film.
Right.
But because the way it was written at the time, you know how the Victorian novels were written at that time, and it had this certain panache to it that made it more creepy, than what you can really portray on film. The original films were pretty good. Even the Bill Murray.
It's great. Scrooge was wonderful.
Scrooge. That was a masterpiece in my mind. But
The Muppet.
they
Christmas
modernized it.
Carol's my
It was a good story. So
Muppet Christmas Carol. That's the best one.
yeah.
But for me, it's always the Ghost of Christmas Present, because you can't fix the past.
No.
You can always change the future.
Yeah.
But damn, you're stuck in the present, right? And that one's just always a little bit more, makes me more trepidatious about what I do, how I treat people, what I say. Most of the time, I can be an idiot, Lon, but I tend to try to, live pretty presently in the moment, so I don't make those mistakes.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm gonna give you another Christmas time story that involves the Mothman, actually. Now,
Mothman.
this is kind of strange, and this is a true story. So, but it's not around the time of the original Mothman; it's before that. But anyway, I received this email from an older woman who had lived in West Virginia, and she was very familiar with the Mothman phenomena. But just let me read what she sent me. So, hello, sir. A friend referred me to your articles about strange occurrences in West Virginia. The Mothman encounters stirred memories of an incident that took place when I was a girl. The strange incident took place near Powhatan, West Virginia in December of 1934. I was 8 years old. Now, at the time, my father worked for Elkhorn Piney Coal in McDonough. He and the other miners would take a train to the mine each day. Now, the day before Christmas Eve, my father mentioned an unusual sighting he and the others on the train had while traveling back to Powhatan from the mine that evening. Now, as they looked out towards the east, they noticed a very large bird flying above the trees. Now, my father was a very simple man and didn't believe in any nonsense, but this large bird really caught his attention. He described it as a freakish-sized owl, very dark in color. The sky was getting dark, but they could still make out the large form. He said it also looked at the train as it flew over the trees. Nobody on the train could figure out what it was. The mere fact that my father even mentioned it suggested that it must have been an unusual sight. Now, my father was scheduled off from work for 3 days during the Christmas holiday. On December 27th, he was getting ready for work, but said he felt poorly. My mother was concerned because he had a high fever and awful chills. She insisted he stay home and telephoned the doctor. My father was reluctant to stay home and put up a good argument, but my mother was not going to back down. She put him to bed and waited for the doctor. Well, we waited for hours until the phone rang. The operator told my mother that the doctor was at McDonough. There had been a horrible train explosion. She couldn't talk, but said that the doctor's wife asked her to contact us. Now, my mother was pale when she told my father what had happened. I remember they both started praying and crying. For years, both thought the large bird was an angel sent by God as a warning, and that my father's life was saved for a reason. Now, my father never went back to the mine. It turned out that he had contracted polio, though he was very lucky since he survived it with only a slight limp. We soon moved away to a small town in Kentucky, where my father found the calling and became a Pentecostal preacher. He told his story of survival to anyone who would listen until the day he died. I happened to read your stories while looking on the internet with my great-grandson. I always assumed my father saw something more divine. That's what he always believed. I'm not so sure now, so thank you. And her name was Emma. Now, the disaster that Emma was referring to was a locomotive boiler explosion at McDonough on December 27th, 1934. It was a boiler in a locomotive that was hauling the mine workers at McDonough in Fayette County. It exploded, resulting in the death of 18 miners. And I also had in the account, I also put a newspaper account of the explosion. So, was it an angel? Was it a Mothman? Was it a harbinger? What was it?
Interesting is what that is. There's I was down in down in Columbia, PA. I don't know what county it is off the top of my head.
That's Lancaster.
When I was in the Albatwitch Festival,
right,
in the area they have the conference, the speakers, they have a railroad museum in there. And I took some photos, and I wonder if I have that story on my phone somewhere from the pictures I took, because they have railroad disasters in Pennsylvania nearby in that. Okay. And I'll have to look and see if I can find more info on that because it's just so interesting how these things happen in that area, and they have these, I don't know what you want to say prophetic, but they have these encounters with some strange entity. And a large owl, Lon, is not, that uncommon for what folks have reported when they've seen Mothman.
Well, early on in Chicago, the early sightings were of Owlman, and I had some sightings in Pennsylvania, and in particular one in Armstrong County, where this guy who was a music teacher saw this thing land near his studio several times. The whole Mothman Owlman thing, and of course John Downs talked about his with the Malwyn Owlman of Malwyn in Cornwall. That's in UK. That's a well-known account. He wrote the book on it and kind of brought it to the forefront. John and I have talked about a lot of these winged humanoid sightings.
When did that?
And we happened to interview him one time when we were in Memphis radio.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Great interview. Lon, when did that train accident happen again?
1934.
What was the date?
December 27th.
Okay. Well, that December month in that area is just bad for business anyhow, because, today is the anniversary of the bridge collapse. And
yes, it is. Yes, it is. I forgot all about that. 10 days before Christmas.
Yeah. Today's the day. So, and that was in 1967. So, I mean, it's been, crazy.
That's why this whole thing, and of course, my thoughts on the harbinger theory and, 46 people dying in a small town, and people are looking for reasons as to why it happened, and being close to Christmas as well. Just put yourself in that, in Point Pleasant at that period. And, think about how you would react back then with that happened, especially if somebody you knew passed away. And I believe most people knew somebody who had died in that. So,
yeah, it's still apparent in that town. This feelings and the tribute. They have a nice little monument there. In the town. I go back to Point Pleasant every year for the Mothman Festival.
I got to go back.
You do. It's a phenomenal. I think it's a phenomenal event. Jeff Walmsley's a great guy, and the town's just a beautiful little town, and it's just interesting and sad because there is a sadness around it. And talking to some of the people, T.J. Owen's a good friend of mine. His girlfriend, Cheryl, they have they knew people, from that tragedy, and it's just. It has a long-lasting impact. Jeff Walmsley himself still remembers the sound from when he was like 6 or 7 years old when that happened.
Right.
And that's not a large town.
Yeah, Tim Shaw, who's part of our team, he lives in Point Pleasant. He knew several people that were related to people who had passed. He knew a lot of the people that were involved with the investigation, when John Keel eventually went down there and started looking into it. But
the town I'm going to retire to, I keep saying that. I mean,
are you?
Yeah. It's on my list of things, I'm going to retire to that town. I love it. It's beautiful.
I haven't been down there in, oh my God, it's been a decade or more. But,
I've never been there.
Yeah, I got to go down again. I investigated that the West Virginia Ordnance Works, or the TNT plant, people call it, numerous times back in the 80s and 90s. And especially after I had my encounter in 1988, I was really fascinated with what had happened. And I really got into it there for a while. And then, funny enough, I get I'm getting these in part of this investigation in Chicago, which I think there's something connected there somehow. There are just too many things that are coincidental. So who knows? I want to thank Win Knives for their donation, and I want to thank Mike Rastatter for his donation as well. It's much appreciated, folks. I got to get back down there. Maybe we'll hook up. Maybe we'll hook up and go down there one day.
Right. We still got to come down from the Gettysburg tour, so we'll do that, and then we'll swing down. We'll make a whole week of it. That's what we'll do.
Okay. Yeah, I'm retired now, so I can, not that it really mattered before, but I'm retired now, so I can kind of go when and where I want to. So
we make plans.
yeah. So does anybody else have another story? Because if not,
I have one more. I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know how paranormal it is.
okay, well,
Because I'll preference this by saying that there's an alleged game reserve for very rich people where they kind of, bring in specialty animals and things like that. That is the rumor
Okay.
around here. Okay.
Okay.
So on the mountain, one day, like we had been coming home from Latrobe because that's where my mom had the shop, and we had come home, and when we turned to go, we lived back in the village on top of the mountain. We turned on the first road, and right there was about 4 or 5 reindeer, and they were just
Reindeer?
standing there. Reindeer, yeah, reindeer.
Wow.
Because and obviously it's Pennsylvania, so you're always on the lookout for deer. So I, especially at night, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and I scream reindeer, and my mom just slammed on the brakes, and it was snowing, and they were sitting right there, and she's staring at them. I'm like, are those reindeer? And she's like, yeah. And she's sitting there and she's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? You just said. She's like, I don't know where they came from. She's like, they're not from around here. I'm like, I was still small, and I was like, they're Santas. And she's like, okay. And she gets home, and she's talking to my grandmother because I went to bed. I could hear them talking, and she's like, I don't know where these deer came from. She's like, maybe they got loose from the preserve. Maybe that's where they're from. And my grandmother's like, are you sure they have them there? She's like, I have no idea. But I remember it clear as day. And I still remember the spot they were standing in and everything. There was at least 5.
Well,
now, I've heard
of this it's Pennsylvania,
Right. I've heard about this importing, rare and exotic, I should say exotic animals in for, people of, substance to hunt, which is ridiculous, but that's, reindeer loose in Pennsylvania. That's all we need. Elk are bad enough.
Yeah. I mean, the elk population is really exploding. So, it's
and you
just
don't have that down this
way.
You don't have the elk. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's up in north.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Potter.
There was
Elk
nothing
counties,
heard about them ever again either.
Right.
Matt Arner's
around here, we up in the Pigeon Hills, and if Chad was here, he'd know about it. But in the Pigeon Hills, outside of Hanover, they used to have a game preserve up there, and they used to bring in European boar until they got loose. Oh my God. Yeah, my grandmother told me that story. I mean, there were boar coming down out the hills going into town, and a European boar is a huge animal, and they are dangerous. And so it wouldn't surprise me. Pennsylvania is such a weird state because
it is.
There's so much crazy stuff that goes on, and it's like the old story, which I always thought was funny because I was living in Maryland at the time, and I used to go down to Green Spring out in Washington County and go deer hunting up there. And I was talking to one of the residents, and he was telling me, he said, it's funny. Pennsylvania has got all kinds of game and everything that Maryland doesn't. It's almost like they know where the border is. And he said, I'll tell you a story. He said, back in the 1970s, Pennsylvania made a deal with Maryland that they would make a trade, that they would import wild turkeys from Pennsylvania, and they'd give Pennsylvania I guess it was sick deer at the time that they were exchanging, because the small sick deer are down on the Eastern Shore. I don't know where they put them in Pennsylvania, because I never heard of sick deer in Pennsylvania. But anyway, so what they do, when they bring the turkeys into Maryland, they put them right up on Green Ridge. That's where they let them out at. Well, the turkeys fly across the border back into Pennsylvania. It's almost like they knew where the border was, or they knew where their old habitat was.
Right.
So I always thought that was funny. But, knowing how Maryland's natural resources were in the department at that time, that didn't surprise me. I bet somebody at Pennsylvania had a good laugh out of that one, though. Well, I do have one more story, and we'll wrap it up after this. This is kind of an odd one, too. This is another story that was sent to me years ago. So it starts out, hello, I have a weird story I'd like to present for your consideration. There's no explanation as to what occurred, though I personally believe the supernatural was at play. It was the Christmas season in 1958. My parents and I lived in a small home in eastern Tennessee. We survived on what little money my mother could make doing odd jobs for other people in the area. My father was wounded during the Korean War, and he received a monthly pension from the government. I was 8 years old at the time. Now, after school, I would work around the house and help care for my father. I knew that money was tight and figured there wouldn't be any gift giving that year, but we made the best of what we had. A few days before Christmas Day, I was lying in bed and started hearing noises coming from outside my window. It sounded like children playing and laughing. I got out of bed and looked out the window. I noticed several blue lights bobbing about in my mother's garden. I went and woke my mother. She got up and we walked out onto the porch. We both clearly witnessed the blue lights moving up and down above the garden. It was very cold, so we went back into the house and watched from my bedroom window. The lights were there for over an hour and continued moving about. We were very tired, so we both went back to sleep. Now, in the morning, we were sitting at the table eating breakfast. My parents were discussing the blue lights. My father said that he heard of a similar occurrence when he was a boy. The deacon at his church commented to the several of his congregation that he noticed blue lights outside the rectory one evening. His explanation was that there were angels watching over the church. The next few nights I watched for the lights, but they never returned. So on Christmas Eve, a few family friends stopped by the house during the day to wish us happy holidays. My friend Larry came over also. We listened to the radio for most of the afternoon. Neither one of us had ever had a television in our homes. I mentioned that it would be nice to have one, but I knew that we could never afford it. I told Larry about the blue lights and the story that my father had told me. Larry said that his Uncle Joe told him the same story about the blue lights outside the church rectory, so I figured that it must have happened. Larry also said that his Uncle Joe mentioned that there were little people with big heads and large eyes who lived in the mountains. I asked Larry if his Uncle Joe had ever seen these little people. Larry said that he didn't think so. That evening, my parents and I were sitting in the front room when we heard what sounded like footsteps on the porch. My father went to investigate, but he didn't see anything unusual. I then told them what Larry's Uncle Joe had told him. My father just smiled and said that old Joe told a lot of good stories, though most of them just were not true. My father then said that he remembered a story that old Joe told him one day. My father said that old Joe told him that the little people of the mountain would bring gifts to folks they liked. He said that old Joe thought that the little people were really aliens because he had seen lights fly off the mountain at night. I prodded my father to tell me more, but he said that old Joe told too many stories that were flat out lies. It was about 10 p.m., so I was sent off to bed since we were going to church on Christmas morning. I woke in the middle of the night to get a drink of water. I didn't notice the time, but I believed it was around 1 a.m. or so. I walked out of my room and into the hallway. I noticed that some giggling and laughter I had heard the night I witnessed the blue lights. The sound was coming from the front room. I slowly walked down the hallway and peered around the corner. There was nothing there, but I did see a square shape on the floor by the bookshelf. I turned on the room light. It was a brand new television set, a Motorola. I remember letting out a scream and hearing my mother running down the hallway. She saw me standing in front of the bookshelf, not knowing what was going on. Then she noticed the television. I can still remember the strange look on her face. She turned and ran back into her bedroom, yelling all the way. I could hear her asking about the television while my father answered, "What television?" We sat in the front room just staring at the television, occasionally looking at each other. We never figured out how it got there. I'd like to think it was the little people in the mountain. In fact, that's what old Joe told everybody who'd listen. So there you go. It's a good Christmas tale.
Blue lights, little lights all over the place. Smurf lights.
Yeah. So look, I want to thank you all for coming on tonight. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Let's see, we got some more donations. Harry Toledo, Lala Bright, and Mortal Clown with another donation. So it's very much appreciated as always. And I'm glad we did this tonight because I do like telling these stories. So anyway, but if you donate, it's truly appreciated. Your support's what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share as well. If you have a sighting or encounter report that you would like to be considered for the personal report show or posted on Phantoms of Monsters, please feel free to forward to my email at Lon Strickler at phantomsofmonsters.com. So look, Sean, Bernadette, I want to wish you both a very Merry Christmas, a happy holiday.
Merry Christmas.
And, maybe it might not be a TV, but maybe the little people will bring something for y'all.
Thanks for that, Lon. Merry
Probably
Christmas.
headaches.
Happy New Year's.
No.
I'm going to bag one for you, Lon, in case they do show up.
Okay, that sounds good.
Trap it. He may
Yeah.
trap it.
Yeah, I want a live one. So, again, thank you two for showing up tonight, and we'll do it again. And I appreciate it immensely.
Thank you, Lon.
You all take care.
Thank you, Lon.
Mm-hmm.
Happy Christmas, guys.
So, folks, again, Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. I don't know if I'm going to have a show next Friday. I'll try to, though. But anyway, y'all have a good weekend. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Good night.